Los Angeles County prosecutors say that on March 31st, 2019, this man, Eric Holder, let off multiple shots at Nipsey Hussle and two other men standing near him, fatally wounding Hussle. He is yet to stand trial for the shootings as court proceedings have been delayed for more than a year. Hussle and Holder grew up in the same neighborhood, and they were both members of one of the largest sets in Los Angeles, the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips. Holder was a rapper, but unlike his counterpart, his career hadn't taken off. In December of 2018, Nipsey was nominated for a Grammy for his first studio release, Victory Lap. The Grammy Award is the most prestigious trophy bestowed by the music industry. Not only was his music career flourishing, he was a burgeoning activist and entrepreneur. He had recently bought an entire shopping center where he once sold his mix CDs from the trunk of his car, planning to turn it into a mixed-use residential and commercial center. His Marathon clothing store is located in this same strip mall near the intersection of Slauson Avenue and Crenshaw Boulevard. This is where he arrives at a little before 3 p.m. on March 31st. This is one of his regular random visits to the store. This is approximately when he sends a tweet that reads, "Having strong enemies is a blessing." In May of 2019, LA County prosecutors presented evidence to a grand jury to secure an indictment against Eric Holder for the murder of Nipsey Hussle and the shooting of two others. The evidence included eyewitness testimony. Among the witnesses was Holder's alleged getaway driver on the day of the shootings. The prosecution has protected the woman's identity out of concern for her safety. When Nipsey Hussle's friend Herman Douglas testified about what he saw on the day of the murder, he referred to the woman simply as the dark-skinned girl. In the grand jury transcripts, she's referred to as Witness 1. She was given immunity from prosecution in exchange for her cooperation with the investigation. According to the prosecution, on the afternoon of March 31st, the woman, Witness 1, called Holder. She wanted to hang out. The woman, who was employed as a driver for a ride-sharing company, met Holder when she picked him up in her car one day. Today they agreed to meet. She drives over and picks him up in her white Chevy Cruze. The two were driving through South Los Angeles looking for something to eat. They drove aimlessly through the streets. They rode across Manchester, Western, and Florence Avenues. At one point, as they were driving, the woman reached over and playfully touched Holder's stomach and said something about how hungry he was. Holder snapped at her, told her not to touch him. "Go touch one of them Disneyland dudes," he said. Apparently, earlier that day, Holder wanted to hang out, but the woman had to work. At work, she said she'd driven a man to Disneyland, and she mentioned it to Holder after she picked him up after work. This apparently made Holder a bit jealous. Now, Holder and the woman found themselves cruising on Slauson. Holder told the woman to pull into a strip mall near the corner of Crenshaw. As soon as the woman made the turn, she spotted Nipsey Hussle there in the parking lot. She was excited. "There's Nipsey Hussle," she told Holder. She said Hussle was fine and said she wanted to take a picture with him. Holder, she testified, didn't respond, nor did he make any indication that he knew Nipsey. Holder got out of the car. He's shirtless, proudly displaying the Rolling 60s tattoo inscribed across his stomach. He goes inside the Master Burger restaurant, just feet from the Marathon clothing store, and places an order. He comes out of the restaurant and walks over to Hussle. Hussle is there with a couple of other men, friends of his. Herman Douglas, who works for Nipsey, and another who goes by the name of Rim Paw. Rim Paw is also an artist who has appeared on a few songs with Nipsey. All four of the men know one another. Holder is known to Nipsey and the others by his old nickname, Shitty. When Holder first arrived in the parking lot, Nipsey spotted him and asked, "Is that Shitty?" according to Douglas's testimony. No one had seen Shitty in a while, Douglas testified. "Nipsey's been here in the parking lot for about 30 minutes, talking with Douglas and Rim Paw, signing autographs and taking pictures with fans. Now, Holder and Hussle have a brief conversation, which is apparently amicable, according to witnesses. According to witnesses, Hussle broached the subject of the bad reputation Holder was developing. Hussle told Holder that word on the street was that he was giving information to the police. According to Douglas, the message was conveyed as a heads up from one friend to another. Holder responds that those talking about him were just hating on him. While Holder was talking to Hussle, the woman, Holder's friend, got out of her car and came over to meet Nipsey. She takes a photo with him, then goes back to her car, and in her excitement, posts the photo to Facebook right away. Holder talks to the men for a bit longer, asks them if they've heard his song. He tells them that he's been in the studio. Nipsey, Rim Paw, and Herman Douglas tell Shitty that they haven't heard his song. Holder daps up the men and goes back to the burger joint. He has to come back outside for a moment to ask his companion for a few dollars because he doesn't have enough to cover the bill. He goes back inside Master Burger and comes out with his chili cheese fries. He goes over and speaks with Hussle again briefly, comes back to the car, gets in, and the woman drives off. The woman testified to the grand jury that as she drove around the block, Holder pulled out a gun and started loading it. She told Holder, "You're not going to do a drive-by in my car." So he put the gun away, she said. According to the woman, Holder told her to pull over so he could eat. She pulled into this parking lot, adjacent to the one where Hussle's businesses are located. Holder begins eating. He takes a few bites, according to the woman. Then he gets out of the car with his pistol. He puts on a red shirt. He tells the woman to wait and that he'll be right back. Then he walks north up this alley toward the parking lot where Hussle is holding court. Moments later, the woman hears gunshots and commotion and sees people running in panic. When Holder returned to the car, he got in carrying 2 pistols, a revolver and a 9mm, according to the woman. He told the woman to drive. She was confused. She asked Holder what had happened. He told her to drive or else she'd be slapped in the face. She drove off quickly. She headed west towards the 405. Holder told the woman to turn on some music, and the two didn't speak for the rest of the ride. The woman testified that at that moment, she didn't know if Holder had just been shot at or if someone had just shot at him. She didn't know if anyone had been hit. But she was afraid that she might be assaulted if she spoke, so she stayed quiet. She hit the 405 and dropped Holder at his cousin's house in another town. She returned to her mother's house where she lived, and soon she got word of Nipsey Hussle's shooting as she was browsing social media. That evening, Holder called and asked to spend the night with her. She drove over again and picked Holder up from his cousin's house. Carrie Lathan, who was standing near Nipsey at the time of the shooting, was struck once in the back in the barrage of bullets and fell to the ground immediately, along with Nipsey, and told his recollection of the event to the grand jury. He'd come to the store on that day with his nephew, Shermy Villanueva, purchased clothes at the Marathon store, and ran into Nipsey outside. He says he spoke to the man for less than 3 minutes before things went, quote, all bad. He also told his story to Vlad TV in this interview.
And he said, well, they go Nipsey in the lot. Go talk to him. And I talked to him. He said, that'll be about a week, bro. I said, okay. And when I said it, it was all bad. The gunman turned around the car and shot me, then shot Nipsey. And then shot my nephew. I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, what the hell? You know, but I fell on my stomach. And all I could see was people's feet. I couldn't see nothing else. I was only, if you replay the scenario and see when the black Escalade van truck pulled up, that's us in the black truck. It all happened in less than three minutes.
Herman Douglas also testified to the grand jury. He worked for Nipsey and his brother Sam in various capacities in the strip mall where the Marathon store was located. On March 31st, he stood there talking to Nipsey and Rim Paw for about 30 minutes, and talked to Shitty for a few minutes when he came over. Douglas went into the store to eat his lunch soon after Holder had left. He sat down at a break room table and soon he heard gunshots. He went outside and saw a man running toward the alley next to the plaza and bend the corner. He says he knew it was Holder fleeing the scene. He saw Nipsey laying on the ground, bleeding. He went to his friend's aid. He attempted to cover a bullet hole near Nipsey's armpit with his hand to slow the blood loss. A couple of minutes later, Nipsey's brother Sam arrived, according to Douglas. Sam had been at his grandmother's house when he got the call informing him that Nipsey had just been shot. He got in his car and he rushed over. Onlookers had gathered around. Sam began performing CPR while receiving instruction over the phone from a 911 dispatcher. Nipsey was still alive, but he was suffering from at least 10 gunshot wounds. The shooting of Nipsey Hussle was particularly brutal. The gunman rolled up stealthily and unleashed a burst of bullets, after which Hussle and Lathan fell to the ground. The assailant ran away, then returned to fire more shots at Nipsey, then retreated again, only to reappear and fire again at the wounded man. Then he came up close and kicked Nipsey at least once in the head before finally leaving the scene. Kerry Lathan testified that just before the gunman began firing, he said the words, "You're through." Lathan told police that as Hussle lay bleeding on the ground and as the killer stood about to fire again, Nipsey said the words, "You got me." Officer Alejandro Guerrero and his partner were the first cops to arrive on the scene. After telling his partner to start gathering witness statements, Guerrero approached the victims, of which he noticed 3. He spoke to one victim who showed him a bullet wound. This was Kerry Lathan's nephew, Shermy Villanueva, who was not critically injured. He saw 2 other victims on the ground. He spoke to one of them who was laying face down and appeared to be shot in the lower back. This was Kerry Lathan. He spoke to the man who confirmed he was indeed shot in the lower back. Guerrero informed the victim that paramedics were en route. Guerrero recognized the 3rd victim, who was critically injured. It was Nipsey Hussle. There were people gathered around the man attempting to render aid. Nipsey Hussle was declared dead at 3:55 p.m. at California Hospital Medical Center. The following morning, Monday, April 1st, Holder asked the woman if he could stay at her home while she went to work. The woman said he couldn't stay at her place and got him a room at a Motel 6 because his ID was expired, she said. She said it didn't occur to her that he wanted to stay with her and that he needed a hotel room because he was hiding out. She said that this entire time she didn't ask any questions about what happened the day before. She testified that she didn't so much as ask if he had heard what had happened to Nipsey. She said she was waiting for him to open up to her, but he never did. She drove him to a Motel 6, got him a room, and left him there. That day, mourners and fans flocked the shopping center where Nipsey Hussle's life was taken and built a memorial to him. Hundreds of people were gathered, listening to music and paying honor to Nipsey. The gathering remained as evening came.
Then, chaos erupted Monday night. Hundreds of mourners scattering across the parking lot where Hussle was killed after police say a disturbance incited panic. Aerial footage captures the crowd fleeing in all directions. Shoes and smashed candles left behind at least 19 injured in the stampede. Mourners carrying the injured as firefighters treated people at the scene. Police dressed in riot gear rushing in, trying to disperse the crowd and breaking up fights that broke out amid the confusion.
At about 8 p.m., according to police, a man at the vigil drew down and was about to fire at someone. Someone attempted to disarm the man. The surrounding crowd began to run, having caught sight of the weapon. A panic ensued. The gunman fired several rapid shots. There was a stampede. There was chaos. There were 2 reported shooting victims, both women. One of them told police at a local hospital that she had been knocked to the ground and trampled as people scattered. She then felt a strange sensation in her elbow, and someone told her that she had been shot. She subsequently drove herself to the hospital. The other wounded woman also fell to the ground in the stampede. Soon after, she realized that a bullet had hit her in her lower back. A friend drove her to the hospital. At least 19 people were injured in the melee, including at least one apparent stabbing victim. That same night, Witness 1, the woman who was with Eric Holder immediately before and after he allegedly shot Nipsey Hussle, said her heart sank when she saw a report on the evening news that named Holder as Nipsey Hussle's suspected killer. The report also disclosed her license plate number and described her vehicle as the getaway car.
Mr. Holder, who I am confident is watching this, I ask him to surrender.
Police Chief Michael Moore made a direct appeal today to 29-year-old Eric Holder. Detectives believe he shot and killed artist and activist Nipsey Hussle and wounded 2 other men with him, setting up heartbreak across South Los Angeles. The chief spoke about what he says video evidence and witness accounts suggest happened.
Mr. Holder walked up on multiple occasions and engaged in a conversation with Nipsey and the others that were there. He left and then came back and subsequently came back armed with a handgun and purposely and repeatedly fired.
Moore also said police are looking to identify and speak with the driver of the car involved, a white 4-door 2016 Chevy Cruze with a license plate number.
The next day, Tuesday, April 2nd, the woman went to police and spoke with detectives for 5 hours. At about noon that day, Holder was apprehended after a 911 caller reported seeing Hussle's suspected killer. The man was in the city of Bellflower, a little over 15 miles southeast of where Hussle was killed. Cameras captured police taking him into custody. The following day, he made his first court appearance. He was represented by a famous attorney who was infamous to many, Christopher Allen Darden Esquire, who was once a prosecutor and who was on the team that tried O.J. Simpson back in 1995. Nipsey Hussle's funeral service was held at Staples Center on Thursday, April 11th, the same illustrious arena where his beloved Lakers play. A capacity crowd was present at the 20-something thousand seat arena. Hussle's significant other of several years, Lauren London, addressed the mourners. Nipsey's mother and brother spoke as well. A message from former President Barack Obama was read aloud to the attendees. Following the service, there was a procession which was 25.5 miles long, the approximate distance of a marathon. The virtual fleet of cars led by the hearse carrying Nipsey Hussle's body wound through the city. Bikes accompanying the convoy did wheelies down Vermont Avenue. Low-riders tilted on hydraulics. Tens of thousands of people flooded the streets to catch a glimpse of the motorcade. Onlookers stood on rooftops and balconies. In downtown, Watts, Inglewood, and in South LA. The procession paused in front of the Marathon clothing store on Slauson, and the hearse was swarmed by fans. The convoy ended at Angela's funeral home on Crenshaw Boulevard, and Hussle was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Cemetery. At around 6:25 p.m., there was a drive-by shooting at the intersection of 103rd and Main Streets in the Watts area. 5 people were injured, one of them fatally. The shooting happened in the vicinity of the funeral procession's route. Holder was indicted on May 9th on 1 count of murder, 2 counts each of attempted murder and assault with a firearm, and 1 count of possession of a firearm by a felon. The following day, Chris Darden, Holder's lawyer, quit the case. He decided not to defend Holder after receiving death threats against himself and his family for being so audacious and so shameless as to defend the man who allegedly killed Nipsey Hussle. Darden has been persona non grata to much of Los Angeles' black community and to much of black America who witnessed him trying to put O.J. Simpson in prison almost 25 years ago. He was a district attorney then, and to many in the black community, he was an Uncle Tom, a traitor, and a house nigga for having prosecuted and persecuted a brother who was so beloved to so much of black America. His reputation took another hit as soon as the information became public that he would be representing Holder. His law office began getting threatening phone calls almost immediately. According to the Los Angeles Times, the messages on Instagram and Facebook trickled in, some from anonymous accounts. One caller left a voicemail, Darden recalled, saying he hoped someone would walk up behind the attorney and shoot him in the head. "And I'm a shooter," the voice said. The drama was triggered by something Darden has done quietly for years, appear in court to defend someone charged with murder. He announced that he was leaving the case in a Facebook post which read in part, "After centuries of a history of black men hung from trees without trial, or after thousands of cases of black men tried, convicted, and executed without counsel, after Gideon versus Wainwright and Powell versus Alabama, I cannot understand why in 2019 some people would deny a black man his Sixth Amendment right to counsel of his choice, or why defending such a man should invite threats not only against me but against my children too. The right to counsel is not only a constitutional right, it is a civil right as well, just as they were in 1995. Cowards never change. These days, these cowards don't send letters. Instead, they sit anonymously behind keyboards threatening a man's mother and children. And some folks think that's funny. It isn't, and I won't ever forget it." When Kerry Latham was shot on March 31st of 2019, along with his nephew and Nipsey Hussle, he was 56 years old, living in a halfway house, and was 7 months removed from a prison stretch of more than 2 decades. In 1994, he had stabbed a woman to death. Around that time, he had started selling drugs to support his family and found the profession lucrative. But then he got into a dispute with one of his customers. Speaking to NPR, he said that he'd become suspicious that one of his customers had been cheating him, paying him for crack rock, then breaking off a piece of it with her fingernail, and then complaining that what he had sold her was too small and demanding a refund. Once she even called the cops on him. Eventually she tried this in front of other dealers and customers, and the two got into an argument that got physical. "They put their hands on me," Kerry says, "and hit me on the back of my head, and that set the alarm off. While 2 other dealers held the woman down, Kerry stabbed her in the back, then ran away and left the woman to die alone in the street." Latham was freed in 2018 and began living in a halfway house. He received a care package from Nipsey soon after his release, but didn't know the rapper well as he was from a younger generation. But the conditions of his parole stipulated, among other things, that he was prohibited from associating with known gang members, which Hussle was. So after receiving treatment for his severe gunshot wound, he was taken into custody by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation on April 8th on a parole violation. A little less than 2 weeks later, the department dropped its petition to revoke his parole after much public outrage over the arrest. Subsequent to his death, Nipsey's music sales and streams soared. His major label debut album, 2018's Victory Lap, ascended to #1 on the iTunes album chart, while his 2013 mixtape Crenshaw jumped to #5, and he suddenly had 10 of the top 50 songs on Apple Music. His streams climbed from 2 million per day prior to his death to 10 million streams on the day he died and 57 million the day after. He was posthumously awarded 2 Grammys. Nipsey Hussle left behind 2 young children, one with his significant other, actress Lauren London, the other from a previous relationship. The Marathon store on Slauson Avenue was closed until further notice in May of 2019. In November of 2020, the property was defaced by unknown vandals. Eric Holder has yet to face his very serious charges. The trial has been delayed multiple times, first because of the COVID pandemic, then because of the retirement and replacement of the judge who was presiding over the case. Then, most recently, he had a hearing postponed on May 11th of this year when he refused to leave his cell on the day of the session. Holder's attorney has reportedly promised his client will be ready for trial by the end of 2021.